We're meeting again with our friend Dan Milnor, who's a blurb evangelist. And because of that, I asked him about what are some of the key points for creating books. Here's what he said.
Let's start these 10 points. I hope everyone is having a good start to the new year. And let's get started. Point number one is what I call field control. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that I teach multiple times a year. Before COVID, I would teach 2 or 3 workshops a year, and I've seen some trends happen that are very interesting to me. One of which is when digital technology arrived, digital cameras in particular, I suddenly saw workshop students begin to overshoot every single scene they found themselves in. I've had workshop students accumulate 25 gigs of files in one morning. I've had workshop students tell me that they were told by another instructor that a great photograph doesn't happen until 30 or 40 frames into a sequence, meaning you have to photograph a scene 30 or 40 frames before you get to something good, which is pure lunacy. There's nothing truthful about that. So long before the book becomes a reality or something that you're even thinking about, you have to have control in the field. And that means photographing intelligently. It means just because you have the ability to overshoot and shoot 100,000 images of whatever doesn't mean that's good. And the reason is because it translates into a poor job on editing. It transfers into a poor job on sequencing. It transfers into more work with archiving, with labeling, processing, storing, etc. Everything is connected. From the second that you're in the field making a picture to the time that you're actually going to hit print in the blurb software to upload your book in print, all of these things are connected. So that's point number one, is just to be smart in the field. Point number two is about something called DAM, digital asset management. And this is what I mentioned a second ago, which is where you put your images, how you label them, what software you're using, how you rank them, organize them, export them, and hold them. Because if you don't have a plan for digital asset management, the people who don't have a plan don't make books. Because when I ask, are you going to make a book? They go, oh, I could never find everything. Where are my files? What drive are they on? Have I already exported a file of folders of images? So digital asset management for me means, number one, being control in the field. Number two is I have a system in place of how I handle my files. So every single day, I'm accumulating files every day because of my job for Blurb. Today, I have to photograph a bunch of books that customers have sent me, and I photograph them and put them on my website, and I do little features about them. Yesterday, I flew the drone. Tomorrow, I may go out and work on another project where I'm shooting stills. Every single day, my workflow is identical to the day before. The images come in the same way. They're labeled the same way. They're ranked the same way. They're exported. I export folders of files that are book ready so that when it comes time, yesterday I pulled files for a book about living in the van, which I don't live in the van full time, but I need to make a test book to try something new that Blurb has. And I pulled 80 files in about a 10-minute time frame. Total. It took me 10 minutes total to pull 80 files for a book because my system is in place. If I said to myself yesterday afternoon, okay, I need to do this van book and I got to do this test book, I don't know where these files are, that book simply doesn't get done. Point number three is about editing. I just did a film about this the other day, kind of. Someone asked me a good resource for photo editing. And frankly, I don't know of one. It's a glaring hole. Editing is an art form. Some of us are good at it and some of us aren't. And so that's where your peers come in. That's where your colleagues come in. That's where you reach out to a friend and say, look, I just did my first draft of this edit. Can you look at it and tell me if I have holes? Can you look at it and tell me if there's an image that doesn't fit? Just because you're in love with an image doesn't mean it makes your book. Because here's the thing, I'm not sure what kind of projects you're working on, but I'm pretty sure this isn't a class about making a portfolio. This is a class about making a book. And there's a huge difference between a book and a portfolio. A portfolio is just a few of your best images that may or may not tell a story. but a book has a narrative and an arc, and you have to tell that story and that arc, and that requires imagery that will not be aesthetically pleasing. That requires imagery that are what I call transitional images that get a reader or a viewer from one piece of your story to the next and may not be beautiful. And that takes a very specific kind of edit that if you're not used to doing it, it's like any other skill, it takes practice. And you're going to fumble around, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to get books back that you're going to look at and say, oh my God, why did I leave that image in? Or why did I run that first? Why is it on the cover? That's totally normal. Everybody does that. But editing is key. And the last thing I'll say about editing, which is a major cliche alert, less is more. If you're making a book that has 200 images in it, too many.
Yeah.
No one's going to look at it. The global attention span is getting smaller, not larger, and it's more and more difficult to get undivided attention. The beauty of a book is that it has a chance of getting undivided because it's a physical object, and you have to physically hold it in your hand, and you have to put your phone down, and you have to flip through these pages. It's a weird psychological thing that happens now. Point number 4 is a sister point to point number 5. And when someone asked me last week if I had a resource for editing, and I said no, which is sad. I'm sure there's one out there. I have to find one. There is certainly, I've seen nothing out there about sequencing. And sequencing is point number 4. And this is the forgotten chapter of bookmaking. This gets overlooked at a scale that's hard to even fathom. And this is the idea of what images come first to last in your book and why. And the wrong sequence, one image out of place in a sequence can kill your story in your book immediately. It's that important. And again, just because you went into the field and you made a picture that you love doesn't mean that photo comes first. It might have to come last. It might come in the middle. It depends on what's happening. But sequencing your images is critical. Step number 5 is to choose your software path. For some reason, this seems to get so much attention. And to me, it's one of the least important parts of the entire process. So I'm just going to talk about Blurb. If you're using another company, that's totally fine. And I'm sure they have their own software offering. But Blurb offers Blurb Bookwrite, which is our free software, which is a darn good program. Bookwrite is like any other piece of software. Bookwrite is no different. It's just far easier. But what it requires, like every other piece of software, is a test drive. You just have to use it a few times. Now, here's one of the tricks that I do. I have files in Bookwrite, book files, open all the time that I have no interest in ever printing. It's a whiteboard that I'm throwing stuff against and watching it to see if it sticks, my design ideas. So I'll have a Bookwrite file open all the time on my computer, and I'll be doing some unrelated task. And in my head, I'll think of something or I'll see something and I'll say, oh, that's a technique I want to try. I immediately go to Bookwrite and that book file is open and I just start designing. I just start throwing things on the page. Today I saw a book cover from a really famous photojournalist. That was a very atypical spine on top book, meaning that instead of opening it like this, you opened it from the top and the pages flipped up horizontally. And that is, I've done that before with books, and that can either work well or it can blow up in your face. But the typography that he had on the cover, the design of the front cover, I looked at and said, I want to use that. I have to try that. So I opened up Bookwrite. I immediately mocked up that cover, and now it's there for me when I need it, if I need to go back and pull that. And Bookwrite is very intuitive software that's incredibly simple compared to something like InDesign, but it just takes practice. Just use it a couple of times without seriously focusing on whatever it is you're going to make. I think sometimes, like for example, when you go to buy a car, you typically test drive it. You don't just walk up and throw your cash down and say, well, I'm hoping this is really good, I'm just going to buy it. And that's what the software is. So before you get to your be all end all project, just open Bookwrite and play. And then delete that file and move on and go back, open it up again and play. It's something I found people have a hesitation to do for whatever reason, but it's critical. You just have to play with it a few times because it's very simple. And if you can use Microsoft Excel, you can use Bookright. And Bookright works for about 80% of all of my book needs. If I do something that requires way more design or a lot of copy or like graphics, I will use Adobe InDesign. But for everything else, I use Bookright.
Hey, if you want to catch my entire interview with Dan, be sure to check out AYP Plus membership. You can hear the whole thing and a whole lot of other really cool inside stuff, including his Q&A. Hey, remember to subscribe and enable that bell, like, comment, and remember to get out and capture your own images of life.